I'm so fortunate to have Susie Cole on the podcast with me this week, and we're going to be talking about predicting the future. On the one hand, I do firmly believe that you can't predict the future, but what you can do is notice signs and changes, shifts in the temperature, shifts in the wind direction, if we're going to use climate metaphors for this. Susie uses the phrase, she starts to see shoots of something, and then that makes it so that she starts to watch for evidence to prove that this shoot is growing. I look at temperature changes with my thermometer in the water, and then I am looking for evidence. So we're going to be talking about what happens when there are shifts in the market. How can you predict them? How can you mitigate those risks? How can you protect all that you have built? Because the thing is that property is on this very vulnerable plate. Even if you own all your properties outright, we are not working in isolation. You've still got the government making plans. You've still got the variability of tenants in your properties. So whatever happens, property is one of these things where we're on the unstable platform of borrowing. So we've leveraged our properties. We're on an unstable platform of the government and legislation and economic and environmental changes. And then we are on the unstable platform of a client who is a tenant and all of that instability that comes with it. So you need to build strong foundations. You need to be constantly checking your data. Listen into this podcast and learn how. So welcome, Susie. And again, thank you very much for your time.
Oh, it's lovely to be here. There's so much in property we could really cover in terms of themes that would hopefully be helpful to your guys.
Yeah, I know. Well, maybe we'll book in some more as well, or start our own podcast. We can talk about that another time. So what I really wanted to do is pick up something that came out of the last episode, which was about what sort of business do you want, lifestyle or empire? And just at the end, we sort of hinted about this idea of if only we could predict the future, because we were just looking back at the changes that had happened and thankful for the decisions that we'd made. Whereas now what we want to be doing is looking forward in this conversation about predicting the future. But just a little note to you, the listener, if you haven't listened to the last episode, that's why you need to subscribe. So go back and make sure you pick up on it. We'll stick the link at the bottom. So, new topic, predicting the future. And the way that this sort of came about for me, as I'm sure it has for you, 2024 saw in a Labour government, which we haven't had in the UK for a long while. And the flurry of messages that I got from people, and then obviously the tone that you could see on social media was, oh no, that's it. That's the end of the housing market, blah, blah, blah. Now, we are recording this and it won't come out for a couple of months. So I will just double check that no disasters have happened in the last 2 months and we've missed them. I very much doubt that because we live in the property world. But this idea of there is always a pundit out there that's going to predict the market. Invariably, it goes two ways. Either the market's going to fail, doom and gloom, I'm getting out, you should get out, and there's all that negativity.
Yeah,
On the flip side,
people love talking about.
Of course they do. Or when it's, oh my goodness, the property market's going really well, we all need to pile in, usually is followed by a link to a course
Yes.
that will teach you how to get into property, and usually comes after the property market has already climbed and actually the person running the course has been out there. If they've got any brains, they would have been out there buying the properties and only running the course afterwards, because if the property market is ready to go into. But I feel like for me, over 20 years of it now, and I don't know how you feel, that it doesn't really matter what the property market is doing. It's just a case of how many I buy, how I buy them, what I do with them. I mean, what's your thoughts about this up and flow?
I would very largely agree. And I think so I've been in for 15 years, you've been in for 20, so it's 35 years, guys, and we are agreeing. And I think where my agreement comes from is actually from years ago. I worked in the cashmere industry, which did give me a taste for delicious clothes. And I was I was a youngish executive within Scottish Enterprise. So that's the kind of economic development agency there to help Scotland's jobs. And I come from Scotland. So it was in the borders. In the borders, there's the textile industry. And as we know, a lot of textile industry has gone abroad. Okay. So there's your background. So of course we wanted to keep these jobs. So rural area, very few other jobs, very few other industries, too much reliance on one industry. So we're desperately keen to keep these jobs. So I would go in and I would bring in contractors and consultants, like operation consultants and things like that. So I would sit either on the board or at the board or as an advisor to the chief execs and the main departments within all these different cashmere firms. And then we had a collective promotional project going as well, where we spent a couple of million quid promoting Scottish cashmere abroad. Okay. And so what that allowed me to understand, as well as I
Nice
developed
clothes.
a major cashmere habit, whoops, which I don't seem to have been able to get rid of. What that allowed me to see was essentially, by the way, for anyone that doesn't know, Scottish Cashmere are the producers of cashmere that make the cashmere on the runway of almost every single designer you see. So Chanel ended up buying actually one of the businesses I worked with. So Chanel, Yves Saint Laurent, everybody typically will use Scottish cashmere. So you're talking the best of the best of the best, okay? So what that allowed me to see, because I'm not knocking it, it's a gorgeous product, was we have the same thing, the same yarn, the same machinery, more or less, and yet you've got a business that's the top textile business in Europe, and then you've got businesses in special measures. Special measures mean that the banks lent them too much money, so they can't afford to make them bust. The bank's just like, well, you've got to keep going because we've got too much cash in you.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, I don't get this, guys. This is the same stuff. So it taught me it was all about management, direction, strategy, delivery, because we've got the same yarn, the same skilled workforce, the same machinery, and one of you is leading Europe, and the other one of you is you're so deep
In the weeds.
back. Too deep, with a whole range in between. So it really showed me the power of leadership, entrepreneurship, strategy, implementation with the same product. Because I advised 14 companies. And I think it's the same for property. So we can sit and listen to all these moaning and groaning. And, occasionally we might have a cup of tea and jump in a little bit ourselves. And then we need to go, and so what does that mean for me? And how am I going to approach the market, the large market, the small market? What are my implementations? What's my analysis? What's my implementation? How do we press go? How do we differentiate? How do we understand all of the usual stuff in business? So I got no truck with anybody that says, oh, it's terrible, you should get out of the business. I'm like, no, this business is amazing.
No, I would absolutely agree with you. And we talked in the last episode, I think you said you started 2009,
just after the recession, when everybody was saying properties are dead duck. Lehman Brothers had collapsed, the whole everything, Northern Rock, oh my lord, everything. Yes.
So I had been doing it
happy.
No, I'd been doing it for about 18 months myself, full time at that point.
Wow.
I started out in 2004, which was quite lucky, but I had literally just before everything crashed, managed to secure another 2 properties.
Yeah.
And got those in London. And then I had just started my mission to buy Liverpool and regenerate it. I think that's what I was going to do. Loved the Victorian houses, and that was it. I was going to go up there and rescue every one of them.
Yes.
And everything that I bought in that first year was now not worth what I paid for it.
Painful.
And it was emotionally ego painful. It was ego painful. But and we had this conversation, didn't we, about, as a woman, they'll come up to you and they'll say, so how many properties do you own? And that's, apart from the fact that's none of your business. How much money is in your bank? And I used to use much more shocking sentences back, because I just felt like, you're being so rude.
Yep.
You're asking, I don't know, my bust measurement, basically. It's as personal as that. What is, how many properties have I got to do with anything, and certainly got to do with you? What you're trying to ask me, as we've said before, is how successful I am. So if someone came up to me and said, what's your portfolio worth? I would have, from an ego perspective, been mortified, because it was
Yeah.
worth so much less than I originally started out with. And it wasn't worth a lot in the first place, because where you're buying places in Bristol, I'm buying, like, in those days, goodness, if I paid £70,000 for a house, I was paying a lot. So
Yeah.
a big difference in the portfolios and the strategies and the areas that we were investing in.
Which I think we need to explore once we look at how do you figure out the future?
Yeah. Okay. So let's have a look at
Subject
that.
to time.
Yeah. So, but at the end of it, I didn't sell any of them.
Yeah.
And those houses that I bought in 2008 at the very early stages, I didn't sell until probably 2018 was
Yep.
maybe my first sell, maybe even later than that. So I kept them all that time. I kept them 10, 12 years. And when I sold them, they were worth more
Yep.
than I bought for them, a lot more than I bought for them. And in between all of that time, I'd had all the cash flow.
I remember being on a panel only a few years ago, maybe just before COVID, with, I won't name him, but lovely guy in London, who was being vaunted as being super successful. What was nice about him was he was very straight speaking. And so he sat beside me on this panel up in London at an event, and he basically said, I'm going to be frank, audience. There were in 2009. There were, I only got through by the skin of my teeth. Yes, I'm worth tens and tens of millions now, but it was very close, kids. It was a very squeaky time. So
Yeah.
so those external big shocks can really impact on
Yeah.
things like, have you invalidated your mortgage, your covenant? Are you at what loan to value? So I knew a guy, a Greek guy, who'd amassed a £60 million property portfolio. So I knew of, I didn't know him personally, sorry. I knew people who worked with them closely. Really competent guy, age 60, really good developer, maybe just pushed a little bit, as developers often do. Amassed a £60 million property portfolio. The property prices dropped temporarily in that recession, and the bank said, you have 30 days to repay your full funding.
Yeah.
So the question there is, what does it teach us? Because he'd breached his covenant. No, tell you what had happened. He had gone in to say, look, technically I'm slightly breached my covenant. I've never not paid the mortgage. I want to just sit down with you, make sure we're clear, square, all the rest of it. And they turned around and said, yeah, you've got 30
Well, have
days.
it back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
so probably his
obviously
big mistake was stepping up and telling a bank anything like that.
100%. Keep your head
Never
down.
tell the bank anything unless they ask the question.
So there's some things there, which is, how do you mitigate risk where the risk is external to your business, not internal to your business? So the first one is, you don't have all your funding with one bank. And the second one is to realize, no offense to banks, they give you the umbrella when it's sunshine and they take the umbrella away when it's raining.
Yes.
And we've all experienced that with banks. And
Yes.
so you divide your funding, and of course they want your whole portfolio. And then the third one is to have always access. And you and I may differ on this one, because I know that I did a lot of external funding, all paid back now, to always have those working relationships with the investors that can smooth out, major, as long as you're not borrowing Peter to pay Paul,
Yes.
we're not talking Ponzi nonsense. We're talking solid, but this isn't fun. And then the final one is to have probably multiple streams of income. And then the final one is to just go and run your business properly.
Yes.
So if I had a tenant moving out at 10 o'clock in the morning, I would have a new tenant moving in at 6 o'clock in the evening. And I would have the cleaners booked at 1 minute past 10, for full clean and everything. And I'd have pre-inspected the house,
Yes.
or my team would have done. And so ideally we would know exactly what needed doing. And so it was fast out, fast in, old school business, which is, we don't do voids.
No. Yeah. No, interesting. And I think the point you made there that I really picked up on is that Peter to pay Paul bit.
Oh, golly.
Is when you're in trouble.
Yep.
What sort of trouble is it? Is it that you, like the builder we spoke about at one point, who went on holiday and then their builder wasn't doing the work and they weren't managing them? Is it?
Well, ultimately, that's your responsibility. Their
No,
fault,
I
your
agree.
responsibility. Yeah.
Yes. No, I agree with that. But is that the sort of mistake you're making? Management mistakes? Is it a funding error? all your eggs in one basket, everything with one lender. And
Yep.
particularly when we started out, that was the flavor, wasn't it? It's
Yes.
interesting how,
Mortgage Express.
yeah, well, God, yeah, mortgages, but how there were flavors of lenders
Yes.
which then created specific techniques. So Mortgage
Yes.
Express allowed the same day remortgaging, which meant that
Yes.
everybody was buying a house on day one, remortgaging it, buying it in the morning, remortgaging it in the afternoon, pulling
Yep.
all the cash out,
Yep.
often elevating the value because there was all sorts of other shenanigans that would often go on, this whole BMV and blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
And end up with, and it was all about the three letters, wasn't it? BMV, no money down, NMD, all this
That's right.
stuff was going on. And basically what you were ending up doing was buying a portfolio that was highly leveraged
Oh my Lord.
right at the beginning of what we didn't know was going to be a global crash. So
Yep.
anybody in 2007 was buying at the height of the market. 2008, you were buying at the start of a global crash.
Yep.
All of the properties that were bought in that period would have been probably no money down, probably some form of below market value, remortgage, same day, pull it all back out. And no wonder that Mortgage Express fell over because
Yep.
look who they lended to, and
Yep.
everybody had all their eggs in those baskets.
Eggs in one basket.
Um,
It's logical business sense. I
mm,
remember mentoring a lovely guy, lovely guy. He'll know who he is if he listens. I mean, a really gorgeous human being, kept up with him over the years. And he had 50 properties, almost all from Mortgage Express. And
mm,
so he'd kind of gone through all of that. And then he was like, right, time to professionalize. And, it was a little bit of a bird's nest. We did have to do some kind of refinement. And that's a polite way of saying it. And he knows that, and just professionalize
yeah,
because I think people got so excited about being able to buy the asset, they didn't realize they were actually running a business. So
totally.
so so knowing about how to predict the future, first, we don't know everything at all. So we've got to have a core, solid, competent business at the core of what we do, because then
Yes.
we can. I don't mean we can ignore, because we'll maybe come on to that. We can't ignore what's going to happen in the external environment, but we've got a stronger base. And by the way, before anybody thinks I'm sanctimonious, I definitely overtraded a couple of times. I definitely at one point had an 85% loan to value more portfolio, and it didn't make me sleep. So
No.
I've always been quite keen to run cash generating strategies like deal packaging or joint venture flipping in order to pull cash back into the property portfolio to pay houses off. And I remember paying my first one off and I was giddy. I came out of the bank. It was only like, I don't know, 78 grand or something. And I came out and I couldn't walk straight. I mean, I looked like I was drunk. I was giddy with excitement that I just paid off my first investment property. So I'm
Oh,
quite a
brilliant.
fan of, well, that equation, age minus 100 minus your age should be your loan to value. So I'm 53 at the moment. So my loan to value needs to be 47%. I
Nice.
like, because it's now telling you in the long run, kiddo. I mean, I have an older friend of mine who a few years ago wasn't now being awarded mortgages and his loan to value was still too high. And you sat there going, well, you're slowly running out of runway. Ooh, nobody
Yes.
tells you that in the course,
No.
that once you hit a certain age and whether you may or may not be able to, you may not have the product. And also the other thing is that products get withdrawn. So you can't
Yes.
always count on that certain product. So I'm old school. I don't like being highly leveraged. I
No.
want to sleep at night. I like having properties unencumbered. I like having cash generating properties, and I like, things in place.
No, I totally agree with you. And I've always been, and there's a lot of it out right now, isn't there? The BRRR, buy, refurbish, remortgage, rent, or if I've
Yes,
got them in the right order.
agree.
I'm not a fan of that. If you want to buy and refurbish,
Yep.
don't over leverage at that point.
Yes. Now I did that
Yeah.
repeatedly, non-stop, but then I had a second strategy, which was a cash generating strategy as well. So I didn't. I
You
I
didn't
was
rely on it.
technically, and I use the word technically, I've been a millionaire for about a decade now. Now that's not me being a big, what do you call it, humble brag. I want to explain myself. for the for almost all of those years until I had my little sabbatical, I didn't take a penny out of that property portfolio. And what I mean by technically is assets minus income was actually 11 and a half years. Assets minus income, the bit in the middle, if I was to sell it, you know, and paying all my cash, then it would be multi-millions. Okay. But at no point did I actually take money at that property portfolio for many, many years until I just had my little medical blip. And when I say technically, I was completely truthfully, you know, on the balance sheet, but the cash flow was incredibly tight the whole time you're growing, because of course you're reinvesting in property the whole time. So so it's called mitigating risk, really. So
Mm.
predicting the future, how do we do it?
Yeah, so that, just to pick up on that bit about whether you remortgage, that is a risk approach, isn't it? So
Yes.
you were looking to grow a portfolio. Did you from day one have a target income, and that's why you were growing it to get to a target income, or you were just in the process of growing it at the time?
I was in the process of growing it. I the one thing I had some money blocks around was my target income.
Right.
I was one of those entrepreneurs that was able to delay gratification maybe a little bit too much. So for many years, my sort of nominal mental position was, I feed the portfolio, it doesn't feed me, which I think is actually incorrect position. And now I'm like, no, it feeds me. And
Yes.
oh my goodness, you make some really intelligent choices when you've moved your mental shift around.
Yeah.
However, I will say that that delayed gratification, where I wasn't taking money out the portfolio, really helped in the early stage, where, you know, the marshmallow test, you build the property portfolio, and you know, you live on £800 a month kind of thing. So it did assist with the growth, but then you have to come to a point and go, Susanna, don't be ridiculous, my darling.
I
Yes.
think there are phases, aren't there? There's an acquisition phase, and during the
Yes.
acquisition phase, you're going to work hard. You're not going to take much money out. You're focused on growing the portfolio. And then
Agreed.
comes a point where you consolidate and you go, okay, so I've been doing it for, I would go 5 years, because most people are 5 year
Yes.
mortgaging. When we started, it was all, oh goodness, I remember 1, 2, and 3 year mortgages, what you used to pick from. You would never have picked a 5 year mortgage. But
Now I did. And the
oh,
reason
even in the early days.
was, in the early days, the reason was because I was relatively highly geared, even though the 5 year mortgage was a little bit more expensive. It, again, this is about predicting the future.
Gave
Back to
you gave you the security.
it gave me the security. And given that I was conscious that I was taking financial risks by being relatively highly geared, that occasionally didn't let me sleep at night, having that longer term knowledge and managing the portfolio really tightly. So, I mean, I only have ever had two tenants not pay me ever.
Mm.
And I've had thousands. And that's because we're really tight on payment and really tight on, and we will take people to court, but typically we communicate with them and threaten to take them to court,
Yes, and that's
show
enough.
them the court papers filled out. But you know, we have run a number, and both those people, by the way, have CCJ, so we've actually only ever taken two people to court, because the rest of them, they pay up before the court actually happens.
Mm.
um so yes, but being highly geared, it meant I needed the security of
Yeah.
interesting, different approach, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
However,
What is just an attitude to risk, but also we spoke about this before, speed. So you
yes,
had a speed thing, which I didn't have a
yes,
speed thing.
yes.
Um, and I wouldn't say it was a hunger, because I was definitely hunger. I loved what I was doing, but I,
You were still buying between one or two houses a year. That's
yeah,
that's pretty
but for
speedy.
myself and for clients, and
Yes.
so
Oh, so one or two houses a month. Sorry, that's
yeah, one
pretty
to two
speedy.
houses a month for a couple of years. But you used the word, we used it the last time, that it was about scaling faster, whereas I never felt the word fast. It was never about speed
Yes.
for me. What I like to look at is, and I actually used to write, I think, my emails, or I used to write reports as the witch predicts, or my witchy predicting, and I once a quarter I would sit down and I would think, mostly it's about what was going to happen to rates, what was going on
Yeah.
with the rates, because and this is what I love about now. Here we are, at the end of 24, and people are going, oh, the rates are so high. And I'm going, you have no
No,
idea,
they're
dude.
average. They're average.
Exactly. This is the normal. They have been a lot higher. And just looking at, okay, so what's going on? And this idea of predicting the future, when are the rates
Yeah.
going to fall? What's going on
Yeah.
in the future? What's
Yeah.
happening next? What's happening next? And of course, even when COVID came, depending on who you've got your fingers in the pies with, one of my daughters was studying to be a doctor in Slovakia,
Wow.
and they knew about the virus in November, and
Yep.
she was
I got I got COVID, I'm sure, in November in
2019.
yes, in Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. I actually got it in Laos, and then it came clear when I was in Vietnam. Although we
Wow.
didn't know it was COVID at the time. Yeah,
Yeah.
because
Interesting,
they're
isn't
so
it?
close to China. Yeah,
Yeah. So she was saying to me, something's coming,
yeah,
and getting quite angry that we hadn't locked down. And in the end, it just got all so messy trying to get her back from another country and everything else. And we didn't do our lockdown till March. But knowing that it was coming
yeah.
and looking at what do you do about your portfolio? Now, in my
So
portfolio,
what did you do then? And then we'll
well,
talk about
I
how
I
you
had
predict.
I had always and have, well, not always had, but I have had for the last 12 years the most exceptional letting agent, Sue and the team at ABC. They are absolutely
Great,
amazing. They're an integral part of the business now.
great.
And so we had all the systems in place anyway that were a bit like you. I'm not going to let anybody get away with not paying, but it is about communication. I
Yes.
had one property that just pissed me off. We had all the viewings booked for the Friday. So I think the date we shut down, what was it, 16? It would have been
20th March.
23rd of March.
23rd March, yes.
Yeah, so 23rd, 22nd, 23rd. Friday the 20th of March, we had
Yep,
viewings booked in.
yep,
And when they announced that they were going to shut down on the Monday, Sue rang me and said, look, we're shutting on the Monday
yep,
because of COVID, because
yep,
we think all people are going to die. I can't do a viewing with my team and with people on the Friday
yep.
just because it's Friday and it's not Monday. Because
Yeah, sure.
if it was Monday, we wouldn't do it. So
Yeah.
we cancelled the viewings and then we shut down, and that property remained empty all the way through COVID.
Ow,
I
ow,
had
ow,
just
ow,
I'd
ow. I
just done a
know.
refurb,
Oh, how
and
painful.
it just stayed. Well, do you know what? In all honesty, it didn't hurt because everything else paid.
Yeah,
Everybody else paid. I had one London tenant who literally got straight on the phone to the estate agent, told them that they were in the restaurant trade. Obviously, they were shut. They were going to
yeah,
get this thing called furlough, 2 months to sort out. They paid the rent this month. So they had the money to pay the end of March, or basically it was the beginning of April's rent.
yeah.
So they paid that rent, and then they missed the beginning of May's rent, and then at the beginning of June they paid 2 months. But
Great.
because we didn't take lots of money out of the portfolio,
Yes.
because I have, well, I think I am actually a huge risk taker, but it depends who you're comparing yourself to. If you're just comparing yourself to somebody on the street, I'm a huge risk taker, but
Yeah.
certainly some of the things that you've done would have been a lot riskier. And you saying things like you didn't sleep.
No.
At no point has my portfolio ever woken me up, and I've never worried about the portfolio at all. And we had this one tenant who didn't pay the rent 1 month, but actually there was not so much money, but there was plenty of money in there to pay all the
Yes.
mortgages. That's the key thing. If
Yes.
you're not if you're not expecting the portfolio to put food on your table, all
Yes.
the portfolio has to do is pay the mortgages,
Pay for itself. Yes.
then not whether I get paid or not, that's not the point. No, I definitely want to be paid, but whether you pay me today or we have a conversation and you pay me next week or next month, but then you're back up to date again because
Yeah.
there is this thing called a pandemic,
Yeah.
that didn't worry me. And I had people on the phone to me, again, someone who, if I say their name, you would know who they were, who had a combination of their own portfolio, which were all HMOs. They
Yeah.
had then done rent to rents, and they had done
Oh.
and they'd done JV rent to rents, which is even
Oh.
better. Okay, so
No.
a JV rent to rent is, unlike Susie, who borrowed money and actually put someone else's money together with her stuff into a physical asset, a house.
I only ever bought and sold. I never held with anyone.
Okay, but you
Just
were doing it to buy it, to sell it,
yes.
etc. But there was
Yes.
a physical being that the money went
Yes.
into,
Yeah.
tangible. This person was borrowing your money to put into this property that they didn't own, that they had
No.
borrowed to do a rent.
No.
They've
No.
got staff. They were going to sack all the staff. Well, there's a furlough scheme. Why aren't you just putting your staff on furlough? Because now you're going to lose all of the intellectual assets in your
That's right.
business,
That's right.
all
All
of
the
the experience. You're going to just sack them. And at that
yeah.
time, we were only in that first 3 months phase, or was it 6 weeks we shut forward? 3 months, 6 weeks. I can't remember what we did the first time. It feels like a lifetime ago. But COVID one, lockdown one, however long that was, they were going to get rid of staff. And it was like talking them back off the edge, and simple questions of how much money have you got in the bank? And they had cash in the bank. How much money do you need on a monthly basis? Bearing in mind, you're not going to be able to drive anywhere. I need this much, right?
Trade it through.
Yeah. Take this number. How much do you need a month? Divide it into your personal savings. You've got enough money for the next 10 months.
What's your run rate?
At the
runway.
at the very least, you can survive for 10 months if you did absolutely nothing. And quite frankly, if COVID hasn't sorted itself out in 10 months, chances are you might be dead anyway. So
that's
all right. So first off, stop panicking. You can feed yourself for 10 months. Now let's go back and look at the business. What is the issue? And of course, the issue was HMOs, houses of multiple occupancy, tenants not wanting to stay in shared houses with people. Often, if they were young people, they went back to their families. If they were workers, they didn't have to stay here for jobs, and they went and mixed in with, whoever, and people scattered. And then they had empty properties. And not only did they have empty HMOs that they owned, they had HMOs that they owed money to somebody else. That's the extra level.
Awful. Wrong structure of business. I don't like rent to rent in the first place, because so I think that then goes back to first principles, which is, who is your client type? What is your product? So for me, my products are student lets. They were professional HMOs at the time of. By that point, we were student lets, which was great. So all the students basically stayed there. We did have a whole bunch of service accommodations. Well, I could see COVID coming, so I shut down the service accommodation and I moved them all to single lets in advance of lockdown. And then how competitive is your product, and where's the price point? So we were upper quartile of the product. So if a carpet needs cleaning or changing, a house gets repainted every 5 years, all the things. If something needs fixing, it gets fixed within 24 hours, please. We're not messing around. So good quality. And therefore, typically we had professional type tenants or students with parents who were happy for the young ones to still be at university. So it was a marketplace that was where the customers weren't on their knees. So very briefly, and then let's go into how do we analyze. I, like you, could see COVID coming early. I shut my office early. A couple of my staff were like, I'm not working from home. They kept going into the office. I'm like, no, I've shut the office. They're like, trying to save your life, stop. And we just altered our product and stopped service accommodation. And I think we ended up renting 1 or 2 properties cheaper because we knew lockdown was coming and we had to get tenants in. And then what we did, obviously, we did the whole risk assessment. Whoa, yeah, that's right. We had an absolute race to do all of our video viewings. So we made loads of videos in the month or so before lockdown. So we've got video viewings for everything. And then we would rent stuff video viewings. And we did all the risk assessment, which was, all tenants had to be out of a house when you were doing a viewing. You had to be 2 meters away, all the blah, blah, blah.
But that's your tech and your systemization head coming on.
Yes. It is. Get everything in place in advance. And then we wrote to everybody to say, look, it is your legal obligation to pay. However, if you have lost your job, here are lists of organizations that are desperately needing staff. So it was things like delivery drivers and all the rest of it. So we would send like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of jobs to our tenants. So it was a clear message. We're here to assist you, but we're not here to pay your rent for you, but we are here. If you've lost your job as a waiter, then grab a service, go deliver Waitrose, something like that.
It's interesting, that attitude too, because I think that would be the difference. The other person expected their tenants not to pay. And therefore there was an expectation, but almost you become a self-fulfilling prophecy, don't you?
Okay. And then the mortgage company isn't expecting me not to pay. It's an impossibility. If you want to live there, you have to pay, but we will do everything we can to assist you get to the point you can pay, so we became a recruitment agency unpaid for a period of time.
And that was interesting when you picked up that bit, because there was a point where they started doing these mortgage holidays, and my first instinct was, if you go to a lender and you say to the lender, at the moment there is a piece of crisis, I do not have the wherewithal to pay that mortgage. You think that's not going to affect your credit score?
And you're on the list. no
Yeah,
thanks.
absolutely. So look, let's get to predicting the future, because
Yes.
I can predict the future and I know that we need to finish this podcast. So we're not going to spend hours on this one. Predicting the future. So we've got things like global crashes of 2008, we've got pandemics of 2020, we've got the shenanigans of the Labour Party coming in 2024. And
We
I
sure
say
do.
that because we already know that they're going to be making changes, and we already know that even though probably some of them have a second property, landlords are always going to get bashed. How do you predict and prepare for the future? And you've talked about micro, macro. Go.
Yes. So macro, I always need to make sure I've got it correct. So macro is the big picture, isn't it? So if we
Yep.
do a SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
Yep.
Okay. Strengths and weaknesses are your internal. And what you guys have just heard Vicky and I talk about is how quickly we pivoted and how we had certain attitudes, certain expectations. We went the extra mile, but we pivoted fast. Okay. So that's a strength internally, isn't it?
Mm.
Weaknesses would be, the other person, for example, expecting the tenants to not pay, or whatever weaknesses we haven't let onto you that we've got, that we definitely have, right?
Yeah.
So those are internal. And then opportunities and threats are the external. So where's the opportunity here and where's the threat? And
Yep.
sometimes the threat is a long time coming, and sometimes the threat is a black swan event. I mean, come on, we knew COVID was coming since January, at least. I mean, you knew it since November. I
Yep.
got a terrible COVID thing in November, but I didn't know it was COVID then. So, for example, it's not actually Labour who are moving towards kind of squeezing landlords. The minute you do your analysis, and that brings me on to PESTLE. So these are formal tools: political, economic. So PESTLE for you lovely geeks out there: political, economic, social, legal, technological, and environmental. So political. For about 10 years, I've known that tenant rights are going to strengthen. Why? Because people are not buying houses until they're older, and therefore tenants were typically younger, and younger people typically don't vote, so they don't sway political elections. As soon as tenants get older and they move into the voting population, no matter which politician and which party it is, they're going to have to award them more rights. So I've known for 10 years this is coming. This is guaranteed. So what do you do about it in advance? You look at, okay, if I can't force you to pay, or if I can't say I'm sorry if you don't pay, you can't have a contract with me, i.e. eviction. If you're going to make that very difficult for me, what am I going to do in my business? I'm going to move to the tenant type, which is much more likely to pay. Obvious, isn't it? Top quartile.
Yeah.
What am I going to do? I'm going to move to the tenant type, which is guaranteed by parents with houses.
Yeah.
Obvious, isn't it? So I'm going to look at that political, look at the analysis and go, it might be happening in 5 or 10 years. Oh, look, it's happening now. No big deal.
Let's mitigate.
Let's mitigate in advance. So
And can I just pick up on that idea of guarantor? We don't
yeah,
just use that on the young ones. I don't care how old you are. You can come to
correct.
me at 60. If you're going to sign a contract with me, I want someone close to you who
Yep.
owns a property to also
Yep.
be your guarantor. We have a guarantor for everything.
Agreed, 100%, and so do I. Interesting, isn't it? And if the tenant can't find a guarantor, there's two routes. Either they do an insurance-backed guarantor, which my letting agent said we're not going to do that again, it was too much palaver, or they pay a year up front.
Yep.
End of. And if you don't want to pay a year up front, I'm terribly sorry, and so then the other thing we're now doing, because there's such demand for my student lets, we've now been experimenting, saying, look, we'd rather you paid quarterly, because it just helps them with their student grants and everything. And nobody's worried about it. So
No,
great.
All our
So
students pay quarterly.
So you look at political, economic, social, legal, technological, environmental, and you say, where are my risks and what am I going to do about it? And then you say, where are my threats? SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. And then you go, where are my opportunities? So we won't go into any great depth, but Labour saying, oh, you can build above your house. Woo-hoo-hoo! Well, I got a lot of houses I can build on. So I'm all across that. Or the kind of reduction of rules for some of the commercial to resi type stuff, permitted development, delicious, so we don't get scared of this stuff. We plan it in advance. So that's the macro I do. And then if you allow me to continue, so that's the political, economic, social, legal, technological, environmental, followed by the question, so what does that mean for me? And followed by the question, what am I going to do about it? Where's the opportunity? Where's the threat? where's my strength and how am I going to match the strength and an opportunity, or plug a weakness and try and mitigate a
mitigate a
threat.
threat.
And then we go into micro. So I knew when the 2008, 2009 recession was lifting, I used to do a lot of CrossFit and weightlifting. I'll get back to it shortly. And Ben, who used to have to do a lot of physio on me because, you know, if you lift a lot of weight, you go, ow.
Rupture things. Yes.
I just hadn't told them I was in property, because sometimes it's not the environment.
Yeah.
And he was just saying, oh, my wife has told me that we now need to we need to move from a flat to a house. And so if she is a photographer, he's an amazing masseur and Chinese acupuncturist. So if he feels confident that the economy is strong enough for him and his young family to make the commitment to a property when they don't earn a huge amount of money, that was my grass shoot. So now we fast forward to now. I've worked with my bookkeeper. She's superb for over a decade. She brings her family up beautifully, one at university, one about to go to university in a year's time. Really lovely young adults, these children, you know, real asset to somebody in a summer job. Neither one of them can find a job this year. And this is not kids that will be staying in bed, you know, then now painting mum's house. And you think, and she said, you know, for all that people are saying on in the media, we can't find staff, they could not find jobs. Now, that is my micro moment. And I'm afraid to say it's that my micro moment going, if these kids that you would be joyous at employing, you know, they're clearly competent, responsible, good people,
can't find jobs.
That's telling me that the economy is contracting and people are. So like, I just listened to a micro moment. I put it behind my ear and I go, so what does that mean for me? Economy is contracting. Right, kiddo. Let's just shore up the business, shall we? Let's just have more cash in. Let's just slightly move positions and make sure that we are as solid as we can be for what is coming. Because that's a little micro grass blade moment. Now, I need to hear more of those micro moments, but that was a real dinger last Wednesday.
Yes. But it's that first one that then you put on a pair of glasses that picks up on those. What else am I hearing? What else would reinforce that?
That's right.
Interesting.
So you just shore your business up. You don't panic. You know, you just go, well, let's just reassess. So plan, do, review. Okay, let's just have an assessment. So what was I doing on Sunday? I was doing a little spreadsheet of my property portfolio. I was just having a bit of an analysis, having a look at it, and it bounced. But look how fast. So that was a conversation on Wednesday. I had a few days off because I'm here in New York. And then Sunday morning, I was doing a webinar later. And I was like, right, I think we're just going to have a quick analysis of these properties. Just, you know, so
who's
it's within
performing?
a couple of days response. You know, let's respond fast to the macro and the micro.
Yes. That doesn't mean to say you have to do anything now, but you've responded by looking, by updating all of the data that you have so that you've got the answers at your fingertips when you actually want to. You know what I mean? You know, so that you can move forward. Look, I know that you have to go, that we've got 5 minutes. So
how do you predict the future within in less than a minute or less than 2 minutes?
I think the same as you. I think my thing is I like to watch the ticker tape on the bottom of the news, Sky News and BBC News. And every day I look in the morning and I have one look in the evening. And I'm not really interested in the stories. Occasionally something will come up and you pick it, but I like to read the stories. And the stories tell me what the general public are thinking. And that's sort of like my temperature in the water, if you like. I look at what the currency's doing. I'm no great trader and I don't really know why I'm looking at it, but I like to look at whether it's stable or not. And, you know, dollar to pound and pound to euro, I look at the stability there. And then I also look at generally just the loosest of terms, because I'm so far out on the thin ice now. What the stock market's up to, just, you know, what's it doing? Okay, then they're not making any big noises about it, because of course we had a little blip with the market in 24 in the States. So we'll have a little panic. So just looking at that. And then sometimes when I do that evening one just before bed, and it doesn't disturb my sleep. I'm reading the ticker tape, and if I can get the timing right, it's when they're doing that review the headlines in the newspaper. So I'm reading the ticker tape along the bottom, and I'm seeing what are the headlines. And
Yeah.
sometimes I'm so lazy, I will press pause and I will get up really close to the screen to see if you can read that next piece of font, because
Yeah.
it just lets me know what everybody else is thinking and doing. And then, like you, I'm taking it in, I'm mulling on it. You put yours behind your ear, I stick mine inside somewhere, and I
Yeah.
just go, how does that feel? What do I need to do? And again, like you, I've not so much done the portfolio review, because I think I've pretty much got those bits. I like my numbers in my head. I've got those numbers there, but I'm just having a conversation with my letting agent at the moment about a couple of properties and seeing what we might do already. I don't think that we're going to have a crash, because I'm not hugely Labour, and I think your background is a bit more Labour, and we've had this conversation. But there's a bit of me that has some respect for Keir Starmer, or steer Karma. In fact, if Keir Starmer could steer Karma, I
Yeah,
think
that would work.
we would be in a good position. Yes, we've got the looming of tenant rights, but also we've got the whole EPC grades and getting everything to a C. I think that is going to be a big hit for people. So when we're buying now, looking at those that have got lower grades and making sure that we're making them up to C's the minute that we've put them into portfolios straight off. Because I think that when that comes down, there's going to be a load of landlords out there that haven't prepared, haven't thought. There won't be the tradespeople out there to be doing the work. There'll be a shortage of materials, because there always is. And then there's going to be a whole load of properties come on the market because they can't rent them.
But again, that goes back to political, economic. So that's legal,
Yeah.
which is EPCs to a C. My letting agent's been working on that for over a year. So I was just checking some EPCs the other day, because they'd come in. They're now valid for another 10 years. Funnily enough, they're all Cs. And I was like,
Yes.
oh, that's good, because it was a D last time. Oh,
Yes.
well done.
No.
And they're like,
And
well,
I
yeah,
gave a
because we
talk
emailed
about.
you a year ago and we told you we were going to work on it.
Yeah,
Yes.
I gave a talk early part of 23 to a group of investors saying you need to move on this now, because if they do
Yep.
it now, whenever they bring it in, you're going to get caught out. Do it now. It's good. Sorry, you're a professional landlord. It's good for your
Good
tenants.
practice.
Why wouldn't
Yeah.
you do it? Why wouldn't you have a good property? And they were all giving me all this, and I didn't get a great response from the talk. But you see what I mean about that thinking ahead. I
That's right.
know that was a good idea. I
That's
said
right.
it in early 23. I was saying it too soon for some people to listen to. I don't care. I know I said it. I know I'm right. And I know I've sorted out mine and all my clients' portfolios, and you're doing the same.
Because I think the risk is that property is a big ship to turn around.
Totally.
She's not she's not cash rich. She's asset rich. So you do have to do the strategic checks. So I do them informally, and then once a quarter I meet with my accountant as well. So there are some formal checks. I don't always take his advice, though, and I think I
I know
drive
he
him
said
nuts
that.
sometimes. It's very kind of him to put up with me, and he's
Poor man.
he's brilliant property accountant. So he's probably like rolling his eyes sometimes, but um and some of that is gut feel,
Yeah.
and section 24 is an entire other conversation, but
Yes.
so it is about trying to be both an immediate responder where there's a black swan event and a long-term strategic
Planner.
planner, on kind of 85% of the time, and then 15% of the time being a high fast delivering operator, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah,
Good fun,
absolutely.
people. Jump in because the water's warm. I
Yes,
think
the
get
water's
into
warm.
property if you're listening here to this.
Not that you're biased in the slightest.
No, clearly, neither of us are we?
No, not at all. So listen, thank you very much for your
Nice
time.
to chat.
You're a superstar. We'll still do some more, because I'd love to get you talking to my community,
That would be
because we've got the
fabulous.
Wealthy Life community, and we'll get some personal interviews that we'll stick in there. But for
Love
now,
that.
Susie, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. And it's been a pleasure. It always is, though, talking with you. So thank you
Oh,
very much. And good
thank
luck
you.
to everybody.
Thank you. So I just want to thank Susie so much for her time on that call, a really valuable second interview. So as I mentioned before, if you haven't seen the first interview, then make sure you go and check the show notes and go back through the system and find the interview that I did with her, which is about how big do you grow your business? How fast do you grow your business? And I think that really ties in with this conversation of no matter how big you're going to grow, no matter how fast you're going to grow, you've always got to have that eye to the future. And I think that obviously I want you to get plenty of whoosh out of this call. And I would say there are three things here. That whole idea of PESTLE that Susie talked about: political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental. To keep your eye, what is the system that you are going to use that will be the equivalent of your temperature in the water? Who are you going to listen to? Obviously, make sure you subscribe to this podcast, because then you'll be getting a sense of what is going on. Follow me on Instagram, because if there's something coming along, then I will be making posts about it. But where are you getting your information from? And if it's just Facebook, be careful. Now, I've just said follow me on Instagram, but that's because it's about tapping into where am I putting out my information. But if it's just listening to Facebook, now I love Facebook for property, but qualify the conversations. I've noticed that I am in one group and I have looked at the person making the posts, and that person is in a group that is all about property, but is not actually a property investor. And I've got into a massive row, if you please, about cat damage on carpets. Now, I have seen more than 1,000, maybe tens of thousands of properties. I have cats. I know what cat damage looks like. Yes, there is an element here where there is a cat scratch on the door frame, but the fundamental damage was cheap carpet with a narrow tread. And I have been harangued in that course. It's ridiculous. This thread is just going on. It's been going on for weeks with people chipping in. I've got a cat and I know that's cat damage. I've got a cat and I know that's cat damage. Whatever. I think that you've got to look at who is posting. So it's not maybe so much about where are you going to go for the information, but who are you going to listen to? And as I said, I like to look at that ticker tape. I like to look at the headlines. It gives me that first temperature. And if I start to feel the temperature change, then I'm going to go straight in there and I'm going to dig in to what I think is really happening. Where am I going to go and get that extra information? Or how quickly can I get that extra information so that I can check how my gut feels about what's going on in the market? Because we can't predict the future. So even though Susie is saying she's feeling that there's been some first shoots at the latter half of 2024 that suggests that maybe the economy is coming down, that may or may not be true. There's a bit of me now that says we've actually had a problem with jobs for a long while. And I don't think that Keir Starmer can afford to allow us to fall into recession. I think his team will be making plans to boost the economy in some way. Now, at the point of recording, I don't know what those answers are, but I think you've got to just pay attention to this stuff, even if you're not interested in it. If you are a business owner, if you're a property investor, you're a business owner, you need to be paying attention. So, number one, pay attention to the temperature of the water or the shoots that you're seeing. What are those shoots telling you? And then how are you going to react? So what are you going to do? Do you know your numbers? You should know your numbers all the time anyway, right? Know your numbers. Know which is the weakest property in your portfolio, which is the best property in your portfolio. Know the most vulnerable, financially vulnerable tenants, that sort of thing. And you will have that, because if you put people in a line, there's always going to be somebody at the end of the line. We can't all be equals. So look at that. What have you put into your systems that allows you to mitigate and ride these bumps? If you've been in the market long enough that you were around in the COVID years, what did you put in place? What did your letting agent have in place? If you've been in for so long that you're like Susie and I, that you've been around since 2018, 2019, 2010, what were you doing then? So making sure that you're following this all the way through. So that would be my tips for you. I hope that you have got a lot of whoosh out of this portfolio, this podcast. and that you are going to build yourself a strong portfolio. If I can be any help, of course, give us a call. I will make sure all the show notes are at the bottom of the podcast for you. And I think I'm going to leave you with that. A request, please, to subscribe to the podcast and to leave a review if you have enjoyed it. And a request to maybe share this on social media or share this with people that you know that you think will enjoy listening to these episodes. Thank you very much again for your time. You know how much I appreciate it. You know how much I appreciate you for listening. And I will speak to you again next week. For now, goodbye.